Hey everybody, this is Doug with Artfully Rogue and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to make a cool industrial rustic bar. I'm also going to add a few things that the client doesn't even know about. Check it out. As opposed to doing cheap box beams, I went with some 6" by 6" by 8" solid pine beams. Now, once I cut them to size, I went ahead and strapped them together. That way I can go ahead and sand off the ends, make sure they're nice and even, and everything would sit square. I also cut in a notch on each one of these. This way it allows me to put a little bit more space inside the cabinet, so my width and my length will be a little bit larger. Next, I'm building a metal frame to go between the post. 2 pieces are 59 inches and 2 pieces are 36 inches. Once the frame is welded and everything is squared, then I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes so I can secure the frames to the post with some construction screws. For the panels, I'm going to go ahead and use 3/8" plywood and then 1x4 rough sawn pine. I'm going to go ahead and brad nail these real quick just to kind of put them into place, but once the brad nailing's done and they're stuck where I want them, I'll flip it over and go ahead and add some screws. Clean up the brad nails, basically just make them disappear. Once the panels are completed, then I can put them inside the frames, clamp them all in place, drill some holes, and then add in some 3/8 bolts, which hold the frames in place. Now I'm going to build the base. 2x2 framework is what I used here for the base. Once the base was glued and screwed, I used some of that 3/8 plywood again and gluing the framework and then placing the 3/8 panel on top. Again, I used my brad nailer just to kind of hold it in place, but then went back with screws to make sure that it was nice and secure. This is actually the bottom. So I'm going to add some aluminum framing because I'm going to add LED lights under the bar when it's time. Okay, timeout. So every now and again I'll do a mid-build modification, and for the bar I've done this. So if you remember in the first part of the video, these metal framework I attached to the post with construction screws, with the idea being that once the bottom was in and the top is in, the whole thing as a unit would be structurally sound. What I discovered is while I'm moving this thing around and I am putting it all together, the sides want to move a lot more than I want them to move. So what I've done is I've gone back and I've added in tabs. I've welded tabs to the framework and then put lag bolts into the post. That way it tightens everything up and so I can move it as a unit. So you might want to make that modification prior to getting to this point in the build. So here's the bottom is installed now. And as I flip it over and I work on the LEDs, you can see that I've already painted this black. I did the black on the bottom mainly because I don't want the LEDs to reflect light. Also, it's outside, and if you have any water splash up, I definitely want the wood to be protected. So the LEDs are going to go through the access hole that I just drilled, and because it has an adhesive back, that's why I use the aluminum framing. The LEDs stick to that aluminum, and as I wrap around, what's really nice about these particular LEDs is you can actually cut the LEDs. Hey, pick it up. There you go. You can cut the LEDs just like that, and it won't interfere with how they operate. Now I did this just so we can tuck it right behind there and there won't be any problems. This is the infrared sensor that plugs into the LEDs. And then this is your plug adapter that goes into your sensors. And then once you add electric and hit the remote, there you go, there's my electric, and boom, we've got lights.
So when I took this job on, one of the things that I asked the client is that I have a little bit of creative freedom to do what I want to do to make it kind of a special thing. I've always wanted to create a bar, and so this is kind of the first one that I'm building that I'm probably going to end up putting on my website, and that way I can offer different options for anybody who would like to also buy the bar. But this part's a secret, so they don't know anything about this part yet. Typically this device is used to lift TVs up out of cabinets, but I'm going to use it inside the bar so that I can hide a very special compartment just for the client, so when they're actually entertaining people, they can kind of show off the bar and have a little bit of fun. Okay, so I got the top framework in place now, and as you saw, I just put some screws in all four corners. This is 1.5 by 1.5 by 8 angle, and then I also put in some supports where the boards are going to hit in certain areas. So you may have a different pattern for your top, but I'm going to have some boards going this way, a couple of boards going this way, and some other boards going this way. You'll see here in just a second. And then if you look down here inside the cabinet, I'm building a framework where the cooler is actually going to sit. So there's going to be storage underneath there, and you'll have access to that. On the other side, this is where most of the utilities are going to be. So you'll see where the lift is going to be. You'll have an electrical box in there. That way you can plug in all your lights. You can plug in the refrigerator on that side as well. And there's going to be a door to access all of that as well. So I also used 3/8 plywood inside the framework of the top. That way I had something for the 2x6s to attach to. As you can see, I've hinged one of the 2x6s, and now I'm joining them all together with a 3/8 plate that's going to act as the cooler lid. I went ahead and created a little metal cutout for the handle, and this way the cooler, once I put it in there, it'll actually lift it up, and there it is. So I looked all over the place for a cooler that I wanted to use, but ended up going with this Igloo, and obviously I'm taking some of the stuff off because I don't need it in the cooler, and I'll use it somewhere else on another project, or even may just use it on this particular project here. We'll see. Now I'm using VHB tape. This is going to help me transfer the cooler lid to the 2x6 lid. It's a double-sided, super strong tape. And as I drop that 2x6 lid onto the cooler, and I can press that down, that way the cooler lid will lift with it. What I found out though is that I cut my opening a little too tight. So I had to push from underneath there and try to get that cooler lid out. But the VHB tape held great. Came back with a jigsaw, opened it up just a little bit, and give myself a little bit more room in there. And beautiful. And a quick look from underneath. The cooler closes nice and secure. Now I'm going to secure the cooler to the base that it sits on. Screw a small screw into the base of the cooler. Then I'm going to put a small screw into the wooden base. That way it keeps the cooler from moving back and forth. So when I can, I've tried to buy my nuts and bolts without the zinc coating. So like these lags, picked those up at the store. They didn't have the ones that didn't have the coating. So what I do is I'll take the ones that I'm going to use, and I'll actually pour in muriatic acid, and that takes the zinc off of the hardware that you're using, and basically, you know, makes it look like this. And I'm going for the rustic look, so that's going to give me the rustic look. So I'm going to make some doors real quick. I'm just using that 1x4 pine that I use for the front panels and the side panels. Gluing and screwing. Center door, that's going to be my utilities access. Quick little release there for the cabinet door. Here's my electrical setup. Quad box, 2 outlets, a couple of jumpers, and an extension cord. Once that's all put together, I'm going to actually secure that to the base of the cabinet.
And then I can plug in my lights, my refrigerator, and the lift.
All right, so one of the last things that I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a 2-inch piece here so I can hide LEDs up behind it. If I put the LEDs here, then they're going to flash out too bright, and for me, I don't think it's a nice look. So putting the 2-inch, facing the LEDs in is going to be a little bit more subtle. But before I do that, I want to texture the wood. And the way I'm going to do that is burn it.
This is one of the reasons why I got the rough sawn pine, because it really does a nice burn pattern.
Okay, so we're behind the bar. We're going to start from right to left. This is the area where the refrigerator's going. Now, back over here in the corner, I drilled a hole so that you can actually put the electric that's going to go into this center cabinet. Now, I don't know if you can see in here, but what I've done is I put in some hooks that I can actually put the extension cord out of the way. I've also got the quad box set up, and this is where the refrigerator, the LED lights, and the lift are going to be plugged into. So all the client has to do is unwrap this extension cord, run it out the bottom of this door, which I'll show you here, where as you can see, the sensor is peeking out the bottom of the door so you can turn on the lights.
Okay, and then on the last cabinet, as you can see, I added in a small rack here, so if you wanted to leave the door open, and you could put in a well rack here for vodka, rum, gin, whatever you wanted to do. And I am next going to work on the plumbing aspect of this, so that when you want to drain the cooler, you can actually just open a valve and hook up a hose and drain the water out without having to remove the cooler whatsoever. Okay, so the plumbing for the cooler was a little bit harder than I expected. I thought I was just going to take this piece out, get something that had maybe a threaded piece on the other side, and that wasn't the case. So obviously, as you can see, I took some clear tubing, I put a hose clamp, and then I figured, okay, well, I don't want this hose to kink, because that's what happens. If you do a 90, it kinks. So I looked for a 90 that would barbed on both sides. Believe it or not, I couldn't find one. Not at Home Depot, not at Lowe's, not at Ace. Nobody had them. So what I ended up doing is I went from the 1/2-inch pipe thread to the 1/2-inch pipe thread to a 1/4-inch compression. See, this is a supply line. It won't kink. It's great. But as we go down this supply line, we had to now go back to a 1/2-inch pipe thread so that I could put a faucet on there, which was basically a valve that could keep the water from going out when you didn't want it to. They can hook up a hose, run the hose anywhere they want to, and use that water somewhere else around the house. Okay, so now I can just put this back where it was and screw that back in there, make sure that gets all nice and tight. Okay, so I'm just going to secure this in here somewhere. That way it's easy access. But there we go. That's a way to drain the cooler so they don't have to take it out. Okay, so while I do like using VHV tape where I can, it does help me kind of line things up. It's not something I'm going to rely on 100% of the time, in the sense that with a lot of use, it's possible that maybe this cooler top pulls away from the wood. I have no doubt that it will stay on the cooler. However, it may not stay on the wood. And so that's my concern. So I'm going to use some stainless steel screws, and we're going to put that, I guess you could say, as a backup onto the cooler here. And then that way I have no problems whatsoever with, they can use it as much as they want to.
And as I mentioned before, I'm using components from the cooler on the bar itself. We'll go ahead and use this bottle opener here. Gotta have a bar and a bottle opener. And just to kind of add a little bit of decorative look, I went ahead and cut some whiskey stencils out on my CNC. and just kind of hitting them with the torch. You know, I guess maybe kind of a poor man's branding iron, but it seems to work pretty good. Good old number 7. And this is it, the bar in its new home. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do so now. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters, Barry and Marlene Rush, Funkist Artistic Creations, and Judy Clothier. We'll see you in the next video.